Joining me right now on Beyond Fringe, I'm sitting down with the American Cryptid Paranormal Society, Christian and Daniel. Welcome, guys. How you guys doing?
Great, man. Thanks. How are you doing?
We're doing fantastic. I'm really glad to have you guys back on the show. Daniel, I know last time we had you on, it was very brief. I was doing a live stream with Christian, but it's great to have you here as well. I want to thank you guys both for taking the time out of your schedules to doing the show.
Well, thanks for having me back, man. I felt kind of bad about such a short amount of time last time, but busy, busy, busy.
It's totally understandable. We all have personal lives and we all have things to accommodate too. But since we last spoke, because it's been a while. It's been almost a half a year. What has been the recent update with everything in your research organization?
I'm,
Well, for me personally, I've only managed to get one investigation in. I was in Virginia at the Nickerson Sneed House, but with COVID the way it is, and I've been working 7 days a week, so it's kind of slacked off. But I'm ready to start picking back up.
I'm about the same, man. I've been getting reports. I'm getting phone calls. I'm getting emails. It's just with this whole COVID thing. It's just hard to investigate. So we're very much looking forward to this little episode to end, so we can get back out there and get the investigations done.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, with COVID, it has been a huge impact in the crypto community. And with the recent investigations, it has been pretty challenging considering the circumstances in each state with restriction. But one thing that we are very good at speaking with is when it comes to cryptids as a whole. Now, one of the things that fascinates me about talking with researchers who are boots on the ground is when it comes to tactics investigation. What are you guys? How do you guys go about investigations? What is some of the perks that you guys incorporate into your research that goes about your investigation?
You want me to go first on this one, Daniel?
Yeah, go ahead.
We do an unbelievable amount of research on the property or the area first. That's one of the first things we do. We want to find out what's been there, how long it's been there, what was there prior to that. We also look into the fact were there any other issues on the property, and we go back as far as possible. I think we did one area. We went back to 1760 for property rights and people who live there and things that happened there. So I think that's a very, very helpful thing to do. It's better to know the background of an area, and that way you have an idea what's been going on, and then just to go in there and just look around and say, oh, this is new, this is new, this is new. The activity you might be having could be old. It could be part of a migration period. We just don't know. But when you do a little research, it gives you quite a leg up.
When we hit the area too, one of the things we like to do is bring an offering of some sort, just to show goodwill and faith of intent. I think helps a lot. Any animal. I mean, look at your dogs, for instance. They know when somebody comes in their area with ill intent, so you want to be careful of that. And when you walk into a cryptid's home space, their living room, so to speak, you want to walk in with the proper intent.
How often is it that when you go into certain territories, do these creatures start messing with you?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're gonna annoy them, or if you're going in disrespectful, or if they sense that there's an issue, it's probably right away. I think what they do is they give you a little bit of lax time to see what you're going to do. And if you don't annoy them, or if you're not bothering them and you're respectful to the area and the cryptids themselves, they probably won't bother you. But it's usually when something annoys them that they get a little more uppity, and there's a problem that follows after that.
I think too, if they're feeding or hungry, things like that. I had an experience at work 2 weeks ago, if you can believe it, in an area that I wouldn't have expected. where he took a goat. He took a goat for lunch, and it was unexpected and in a relatively populated area. So it's very dependent, I think, on a lot of different factors.
You talk about things that might annoy them. What are some things that you think would annoy them exactly?
Well, going in, being loud, being disrespectful. Maybe, Tiny's right. They could have been hunting. They could have been looking for dinner, and you could have disrupted their hunt. They could have little ones around. You know, being disrespectful, it could be anything. Just being loud, being obnoxious, maybe littering. I mean, I've heard of people leaving garbage there, and then these creatures will throw their garbage at them. So, I mean, it depends. The truth of the matter is we don't know what's going to set them off. We just don't know. But I think just being polite, I know it sounds a little corny, but just being polite and respectful the whole time you're in the forest or in the woods or anytime you're investigating anything, either cryptid or paranormal, I think that's just a smart thing to do is just always be polite and respectful. And whether you're dealing with a paranormal entity or a cryptid, I think they pick up on that. And I also think that if you're more respectful and polite, they might realize that you're not there to do them any harm. I think the biggest problem a lot of people have is, you know, they they hear something, the first thing they do is grab a gun or they point it. And we both go in every time we do an investigation, we're armed, but that's for our own protection. That's not, we're not going to looking to hunt anything down to bring it in. That's just for protection for anything. Could be a bear, could be a snake, could be for anything. Um, but I also think they know what the intent is. And I think that is one of the reasons why we have pretty successful investigations and we usually come up with something.
I think it's extremely easy to tick off one of these creatures. I actually spoke to a witness who had an encounter with Bigfoot in Ontario, and it's a very notorious hotspot for Bigfoot encounters. And they mentioned how they were just in a certain part of the area, and it's not like they came off intimidating or provoking, but it just this creature, what they saw, it set them off to an extent that it kicked them out of the area. And it's very simple for some of these creatures. I believe these creatures, whether it's Bigfoot's Dogman or any other cryptid out there that operates in pairs, I do believe that they do have emotions and feelings as well as also they can work on their own. How do you guys feel about that? What do you feel that like the Bigfoots and Dogmen or in general any cryptids out there, is it hard for them to live in harmony as a pair or a pack, in comparison to being a solo animal that goes rogue or just chooses to be a lone wolf?
I personally think that it would be more difficult in the fact that you have to have a pecking order. I think even with humans at our basis, we still have to have that pecking order. We still have to have the alphas and the betas and things like that, and that makes life more difficult when you're out here, you're free range by yourself. Myself, for example, I've been single now for a couple of years, and it's much easier just by myself. My friends, I've got good friends, and within that area, we kind of have that pecking order. But after we spend that quality time, we separate. And here at home, I'm the alpha. I do what I want. It makes life a lot easier. And I think that would carry over into the family style of a squatch or any other kind of pack animal. I mean, really, if you think about it, humans are pack animals too. So I think absolutely it carries over, and it would be more difficult to live in a societal kind of cohesion like that.
I don't know. I mean, I agree with part of that, but I think for like the males, I think if you've got an alpha male and he's got a troop or a tribe, for lack of a better word, we're all social creatures. We don't want to be left alone, and he could be living the high life. He could have 3 or 4 other creatures taking care of him and his needs and wants. And I think some of the times when you have like these rogue males, is that they're deposed by age or they're just young starting out, and they're looking to form their own tribe or pack, if you will. So I think that they are social creatures, but I think there's a hierarchy that has to be followed. It kind of keeps the law and order in their social structure, if you will. So I think it's a little column A, little column B, if that makes sense.
I agree with both your guys' perspectives and standpoints on it. I personally have to say this too. I think it's so much easier living alone. I personally be your own boss. That to me, no interruption, no, you can do whatever you want. That is the best style right there, Dan. I totally admire that. And furthermore, I think when it comes to these creatures, there is a limit with things. I do think that juveniles are, and this is just my opinion, and I'd love to hear what you guys think too. In my opinion, I believe that at least half of these encounters we receive, in which they're either an intimidated game or one of which that is very well detailed discussing behavior, I think are juveniles. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, a lot of other researchers always talked to, all the problems or the harassment type scenarios and things of that nature, like rocks being thrown at the house, being looked at through windows, they usually tend to be the juvenile. And I think, that they probably just grow up kind of the way humans do. And, they've got shenanigans afoot. And I think maybe they just like clowning around, and sometimes they take things too far. But I think definitely probably most of the problems are from juveniles. I think the adults are smart enough to stay away. They've been around longer. They understand how, we as humans work. They understand that if they harass us enough, then the fire sticks are going to come out, and then that it's not good for anybody. So I think they understand that, and I think the younger ones kind of just do what they do, and they get away with as much as they can until mom or dad says, "All right, enough of that," and that's it. And I've actually heard of events where people are being followed, or little pebbles or something being thrown at them, and they'll see something in the shadows, and then they'll see something much bigger behind that, and they'll hear like a growl or a whoop or some kind of samurai chatter, and it sounds like to them it sounds like someone's being scolded. So I think what happens is, I think out of sight, out of mind. If mom and dad are around, I'm going to play a little, and they'll just push it to the limit, and then they get called on the carpet, just like a human adolescent would. Tiny, what do you think?
I don't really have a lot to add to that. Honestly, I mean, I've personally believed that the familial groups of Squatch and probably Dogman run really parallel to those of us as humans. I think that we have a lot more in common with the species than we want to believe, and I think they're more intelligent than we give them credit for. And that being said, like you said, it probably parallels us in the fact that you've got hoodlum teenagers out there that are curious and want to push limits. And, mom, dad, aunt, whatever out here smack them in the back of the head once in a while and say, calm down. But yeah, other than that, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I agree.
I mean, it just, to me, it makes sense simply because you'll see that in the animal kingdom. I mean, you'll see that with bears, you'll see it with lions, any type of uh, mammal that has a parental unit there to teach them how to be that specific mammal. They always said, everyone's got to learn the rules, and the rules for us are different that they are for them, but some of them kind of correspond. So I think it's their way of learning how to live and how to do what they do, and the rules they have to live by to survive and stay hidden.
How many times have you seen a gorilla, a silverback, intervene in a fight between either the females or the males, the young juveniles? Same.
I just saw a video on that like 2 days ago. I was just watching a video on that. It's like daddy, and then you find out that the two juveniles are like they're brothers, and their ruckus woke up the old man, and he had to come down and dispense justice, and that's exactly what he did. Then he went back to bed, and they were fine. So I mean, it's just kind of like a universal law.
It's even more funnier when that relates to real life. I mean, personally, I have nieces and nephews. I don't have actual kids, but I'm sure for you guys, if you do have children, it's like the same rule of law right there. When your parents asleep and there's a bunch of commotion, you just yell, knock it off, and everybody goes back to normal. Except that we're not like the gorillas gonna rip the kid's head off.
The parents aren't interested in justice; they just want peace. That's the way I look at it.
I
So,
agree with that. I do. I second that. I want to ask you this though, because something that caught my attention a while back when I had received an interesting report from a woman who was with a group of teenager friends, and they were out in the woods smoking cigarettes. And long story short, they happened to encounter this Bigfoot, but it didn't do anything crazy. All it did was it was observing them, and then when the one friend noticed it, it turned its head, and then they turned their heads and they saw it, and then it ran away. The reason why I bring this up is, do you believe that these creatures specialize with fear? Does fear attribute to them, or do you feel that they just don't want to be seen?
I'll be honest with you. I think the Dogman's got a bad reputation as a cryptid that likes to scare people. Someone a long time ago gave him the name crypto terrorist. I always kind of liked that. I always thought it kind of cool. But I'd say I think it makes them laugh. I mean, I think these creatures are intelligent enough to have a sense of humor. I talked to a very good friend of mine. He's been a researcher for 45 plus years, and he said he's heard them laugh. He said he has heard them just crack up out loud laugh when something is funny to them. So I think they have a sense of humor, but I also think they enjoy the power they have over someone when they scare them. So I think, again, I think that's more a cynocephali kind of tribute. I think they really, I think personally, Dogman or cynocephali, I think they enjoy scaring people. I think it makes them. I think I think it's something they just enjoy doing. I think Bigfoot is probably a little bit different. I think they enjoy messing with people. That's probably why you'll get like small rocks and pebbles thrown at them, or you'll hear or people hear whoops, or they'll pace people out. I think they probably think that's funny to an extent. But I'd say as far as like scaring people, I would definitely say that the cynocephali or the dogman is probably more characterized in that particular realm or arena.
Well, and if you think about it too, when you watch monkeys, you watch great apes, they have that kind of sense of humor too, where they'll pick at you until they get a response, and then they'll go laugh at you. Um, it makes sense, and the level of intelligence that I think a Bigfoot has, most definitely, they enjoy picking, they enjoy prodding, but I think a lot of it's out of curiosity. The best way to learn about something or somebody is to kind of poke it and prod it and see how it reacts. I think in a lot of ways that's what they're doing. But I'm sure it's funny. I'm sure they have loads of fun with us out in the woods. As far as enjoying the thrill of the scare, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a thought on that one.
Well, and it's one of those things you just don't know. You just there's never enough proof or evidence, or you get one with a sense of humor thinks it's funny, and maybe 100 don't. So it's a good question, but I think I honestly think I've had a lot of stories where the cynocephali has just terrorized a family. They'll stand in their window, they'll show their teeth, they'll like drag their hands down the glass, things like that. And with the strength of these creatures, they could literally rip the wall off pretty much and come in if they wanted to. So there's that line they're skirting. Is this just messing with people to scare them because you think it's funny, or do you really mean to do them harm? And if I think they meant to do them harm, there'd be a whole lot more issues than what we hear of.
I have to agree. I think the big thing with especially as you said in Dogman, we have this situation where they're always common with scaring people. It seems to be a fascination. And then, of course, when we're dealing with Bigfoot, it's the same thing. We relate to the juveniles. But see, one of the things that intrigues me the most about when it comes to their behavior is the fact that they do come off as if it was a normal gorilla or a normal monkey. Daniel, you mentioned how the biology of the by the mammals like gorillas and monkeys and stuff, how they operate, and how it's so similar even with the Bigfoots and Dogman. Why do you feel that these creatures, in the way they act and behave, is it almost as if these creatures are actually just regular natural animals and not these abnormal looking creatures, or, well, not abnormal looking, but abnormal behavior like creatures, because they do participate in things that are very much so freaky?
Well, I think that, and especially when you talk about, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the history has been there for so long. I think they are natural. I think they were here probably long before we were. And, humans as a species, we're young. And we have accounts of Bigfoot, in cave drawings. So I think, yeah, they're probably natural. I think the dogmen are a little less natural though. And I think that, like Christian was saying, you rarely hear of an attack. Which of course if if one did attack you, you're probably not going to live to tell about it. But it's always, let's scare this person. And that, to me, that calls forth a little bit higher level of intelligence. That's a little bit less natural to me.
I mean, that's a good point too, Tiny, because it's one of those things where it is, you hear reports of Sasquatch or Bigfoot like attacking a cabin or things like that, but they'll do it with like brute force. In other words, they'll bang on the wall, they'll bang on the door, they'll slap the side of the house, they'll throw rocks, they'll do things like that. Now, I've also heard of them standing in windows and staring at people while they sleep, but it's if you look at some of the reports, there's like they're making faces at kids, they're trying to make them smile, they're trying to get them to laugh. I don't know if that's for a nefarious purpose or they're just trying to make them laugh because they enjoy kids. I don't know, but you never really hear anything like that from a dog man. If there's a dog man encounter, it's either trying to dig out the foundation to go in that way. It's on the roof, trying to claw its way through the roof, or it's at a window just staring at people and scaring the bejesus out of them. Snarling up the window, breaking its hands down. I took a report once not too long ago, well, maybe a year and a half ago, where the witness said that the dog man had one hand on a shutter and was feeling it, and it didn't like the way it felt, so it went up and just raked it on the other side, and did it while I was just staring at the person. And it didn't make any sense for that person why he would do that, other than the fact he was just trying to overtly scare him, or he just didn't like the way the shutter felt. I mean, I don't know. It's just one of those things where until we actually get bona fide research and look into how they socially react with other people, or I'm saying with other animals or themselves and their own social structure, I don't think we're going to know.
Well, and that's something else, Christian. You talk about, we don't know their social structure within their own tribal units. So what we may take as a threatening posture, they may be, smiling and trying to make us laugh. We don't know. We just take it as it's scary because they're 12 feet tall and 9,000 pounds. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean and that's the thing I like. Oh, we're very honest about what we research. We put it, everything we get, we put it out on the pet web page. We don't say this is definitely this. This said this is possibly this. This is possible that. And I just always like to reiterate, there is no such thing as a cryptid expert. There's no such thing as a paranormal expert. There's no such thing as a ghost expert. All right. We are all studying the same things, looking for the same answers. So when someone says, "Oh, they're an expert in this or an expert in that," who gave you the qualification of expert? Where did you obtain? Where did you go to school for that? That's what I always like saying to someone that says they're an expert in the field. So we look at all the information we know and we've collected over the years, and we just kind of compartmentalize it. And if we hear of a new behavior, that's great. We'll put it over here with the other reports. But 9 times out of 10, it's a behavior of a cryptid that we've heard before. Again, staring in the windows. How many times have we taken a staring in the windows report, Daniel? I mean, that's probably one of the most common. Or again, slapping the side of a house. That is a common behavior. I think everyone that's done any bit of cryptid investigation, one of the first things they'll hear is, oh, something was slapping the house. We thought it was something different, but now we're thinking maybe it was a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or possibly a cynocephaly. But there's always some of the same determined behaviors that kind of go through the species. Bigfoot will slap a house, Dogman will slap a house. Bigfoot will get on a roof, Dogman will get on a roof. Their motives might be different, but their actions are both the same. So I think that gets confusing. And I think that's why people think that, maybe they were genetically engineered from the same thing, blah, blah, blah. Again, we just don't know. Maybe they're just really good at climbing, and they can get up places we can't.
Well, you talk about Sasquatch too, and you rarely hear about an attack that's truly nefarious.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it's more intimidation, like throwing rocks at a house. It's like, come on, we're here. You need to leave. When, these things are strong enough, large enough, like you said, to pull a wall down. As a child, I had one breathing in the window, looking at my mom. My dad, when he got up to take off, it ran. There's no reason for something that size and that strength to run from a human, other than, it knows what guns are. But still, there's no real reason. So it's like, I just don't feel like they're as nefarious as some people think. I think obviously some can be, but as a whole, I don't think they are. It's more intimidation. It's more like poke and prod. And let's see what happens.
No, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the Bigfoot encounters, again, I think it goes down to what they deem as, rude or disrespectful. If they're hunting and you go interrupt their dinner, they're not going to be happy. If their kids are around and you're armed and you look like you're about to shoot something, they're not going to be happy with that either. Or if they've got, a couple of watchers out while the rest of the, tribe sleeps, and you're getting close to where they are, that's going to cause a problem. So I think it just reverts to, it's one of those things where the situation is going to be dictated by the circumstances that provoke the creatures. And if like when Daniel and I go into a place, when we research something or we go into investigate, we both go in as cryptid researchers and paranormal investigators. Because Daniel made this comment about when we go in with offerings. We go in with offerings first, and we place it down. We basically say, hey, we're here just to observe. We don't want any problems. If there's a problem, you want us to leave, just let us know. We'll leave, and that'll be the end of it. And we do that before we do pretty much any investigation. And we look at things. I think that's one of the reasons why we're able to help so many people, is because we look at things both from a cryptid point of view and a paranormal point of view. Because sometimes people get one thing confused with another. But I think if you go in with the right headspace, I think that these creatures know that. Again, it all goes back to something I think most animals know. And I think Daniel and I have talked about this, I don't know how many hundreds of times, but creatures, animals, cryptids, most animals know what intent is. I mean, I think you can agree with that, right, Tiny?
Absolutely. I mean, your household dog proves that. If somebody walks in my yard, my dog don't like him, you need to step out of my yard because there's something wrong with you. It's just, for me, it's that simple. And I've seen it with cats. I've seen it with other animals. I had a lizard that I would trust more than I would trust some people. There's some people it would run to and others it would run away from. And I mean, they know.
Well, I mean, and animals, like I said, and it's funny because I've seen squirrels run up and climb up Tiny's leg. it will be on the way, and they just, like animals are attracted to him. He has that aura about him, like they're not scared of him. And I think if you can portray that during a cryptid investigation, or as I like to call it, being a cryptid detective, then you probably won't have a violent encounter. I'm not saying you won't 100% of the time. I mean, there's a few times I've had some nasty stuff happen, and I had the best of intentions, and that did not work out so well. I guess I did not put that forth enough. But it's just one of those things where you just have to go in with a positive attitude, and a great mindset, because again, I think they know when people are scared, and if you go in and you get scared, I think if you're scared during an investigation, one, that's very normal, but two, you have to learn how to control that, because if you're scared, you're going to do something stupid. You might just pull that gun. You might just take a pop shot at something. Well, it might not be a Bigfoot. It could be someone else. I mean, it could be a person. It could be, you could put yourself in a very precarious situation. That's why you always have to be able to think quick. You have to be able to think on your feet. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of new investigators is they don't think like that. They think, oh, we're going to get this, we're going to do that. Nothing's going to scare me. That's all fine and dandy until you run into something. And that's usually when the screaming, the crying, and the running starts. So when you can avoid the screaming, the crying, and the running and keep your head about you, I think that's when you actually get the real work done.
I have two things there to that, Christian. One, you can't be letting everybody know that I'm actually in real life a Disney princess. It just don't work for the
I know
street cred. But two, I honestly just forgot what two was. I'm sorry.
Right.
I went blank.
One was good enough. One was good enough.
Yeah.
I often forget what one is, so it's okay.
Princess from Disney, more like the Frozen, whoever the Frozen princess name was. That's what Tiny's like in the woods.
Would you be Olaf though, Christian? That's the question.
I don't know.
The snowman. You'd be the snowman. The dancing snowman.
I'm known to cut a rug, Chris. I'm not afraid. I can work it. I've seen Flashdance. I know what to do.
I mean, I believe in you. And that's another good thing too, is that what I love about what you guys talk about here is the idea about how everything that you touch base on is something that is not really explored with new research. It's almost as if the perks are just thrown out the chart. When you talk about how there's people that just take it in for what it is, and then you go and you actually try to go out and research, and it's like, well, this guy has so much information and it seems to make sense. I bought his book, but it doesn't mean that he's right. That's such a
huge... You're 100% right. You are 100% right. Just because, Chris, just because someone writes a book doesn't mean they know exactly everything that needs to know. Everything that needs to be known doesn't mean they know that. And you're 100% right. If people saw Daniel out in the woods, like I'm talking about the deep forest, I'm talking about 7-8 miles from a road, they would be amazed at how calm and how acclimated he is in that specific setting. I try to remain that calm, but I'm always a little bit more on alert. But Daniel's got that ability to just be completely calm and very stoic throughout the whole thing. I do my best, but again, most of the time my head's on a swivel. But I don't have the ability that I know when trouble's coming, but Daniel knows where it's coming from and when it's going to happen. Does that make sense? So when you have a partner or someone you research or investigate with that has that ability, it kind of gives you that advantage. Because if Daniel says to me, hey, there's a problem, then I know we got a problem. If the back of my hair on the back of my neck starts standing up, I know there's some kind of issue where they're going to get thrown, something's going to get thrown out, we're going to get yelled at, someone's going to growl at us, something. But you can't put that in a book. You can write about it in a book, but you can't give instructions on how to do that. That just comes from Daniel having that ability naturally, and me just spending just so much time in the forest as a young man and all throughout my 25 years of cryptid research. So you just can't transpose that in a book. That's just raw experience. You can tell people about it, you can write about it, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pick up what you're trying to put down. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you also mentioned that too, because I think one of the biggest problems when it comes down to measuring out basic information is it's very simple for information to be misinformed, and it's so easy for somebody to take a piece of information that gradually may or may not make sense and put it out there, and then it will just make people even more confused than actually intrigued. And the problem I also think is that one of the reasons why I haven't released a book yet, or why I even haven't even explored the possibility of discussing cryptids in books besides writing small articles about them, is because I just know that my information necessarily is not accurate. I know that because I am not an expert as much as the rest who aren't experts, and that's just a fact. We've touched base on this.
Right. But see, now again, I personally, I am writing a book. I've been writing a book, but it's not a how to be a cryptid detective. It's just kind of the things that I've done over the years and the cryptids that I have investigated and run into and had experiences with. At no time do I go out and tell someone how to do something. That's not my place. I can give you some suggestions, but it's one of those things. If you really want to be a cryptid detective and you want to go out there and you want to go, for lack of a better term, squatching, then that's something you're going to have to pick that up on your own. You're going to have to just do it and find out what works for you. What works for me, what works for Daniel, what works for you might not work for someone else. And if we're looking for Bigfoot and we run into a cynocephaly, what did we do that ran Bigfoot off and brought this in? So it's one of those if that then, it's like an equation. What do you do then? Now there's been several times when, we've been looking for a big hairy friend and, we've run into a cynocephaly. And to this day, I'm still completely befuddled on how that happened. So they were either in the same area at the same time, which, totally in the realm of possibility. Again, we've heard reports about people seeing them actually work together. Uh, I heard a podcast not too long ago, and it was from someone I consider credible, where the witness stated that there was about a 9 to 10 foot type 1 Bigfoot male, big alpha male. The guy said he maybe 5.5, 6 feet across to the shoulders. This thing must have been massive. He was in a tree stand, and this dog man comes running out of nowhere, sits down next to him, and he starts petting this thing on the head like a dog. Now, someone's imagination, whether that really happened, I don't know. I wasn't there. And the person who I heard this from, or the show I heard this from, I trust them. I mean, they do a pretty good job of vetting people. But that's an example of something that we don't hear a whole lot of. Now, I know there has been other stories about people seeing Dogman and Bigfoot work together, hunting, things like that. But again, what's fiction and what's reality? And that's the hard part to kind of to separate the two, because there's so many stories out there now, and some of them they're great stories, but they're complete fiction. So, as a cryptid detective, it makes it harder and harder when you get some really good stories and people do the research and they do a lot of listening to other podcasts and they pick up these little minute details and they incorporate them in their stories. It becomes harder and harder to disassociate the fact and the fiction. So it's just another issue that we as cryptid detectives have to face.
And one thing too, if I may back up just a hair, no pun intended. One of the things, Christian, you mentioned young investigators, and I mean young in the sense that they've not been investigating long.
Yeah, I'm not talking about age. I'm just talking about a newbie.
But you think, and I can say this from experience, when you start investigating, you have the desire to go out here and look Bigfoot in the eye. And I still want to do that. I want to do that so bad. I've had experiences. I know they're real, but I've never looked one in the eye, and I want to do that. Now, when that happens, how am I going to react? I don't know. I want to think that I'm going to walk over and try and shake his hand or, introduce myself and be brave and make a connection with Bigfoot. In reality, it's entirely possible I may freeze and pee down my leg. And you have to think about that when you're actually out here, boots on the ground, doing this. And that goes for any type of investigation, whether it's, ufology, ghosts, Bigfoot, whatever. When you actually run into what you're looking for, you need to mentally prepare yourself before it ever happens, because you don't know how you're going to react. It will, I guarantee you, change your life, but how you're going to react is going to dictate that encounter.
And I agree
people
with
don't
you.
think about that.
You're 100% right. And people talk about that all the time, Tiny. I saw this creature, it moved, it stared at me. I thought I was going to die. I don't know if I was breathing. Then you hear people about, maturating, peeing themselves, having a Charmin moment, things like that, to quote the great Vic Cundiff. I think there's probably people out there that have had a lot more Charmin moments than they're being honest about, because it makes them look weak. But the truth of the matter is, you don't know how you're going to react. And when you hear these stories of, oh, I saw this thing and I drove it down and I shot it in the face, or blah, 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 blah. You know what? I got to be honest with you. 9 times out of 10, when I hear stories like that, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And here's why. One, that's basically murder. Why would you just murder something? And two, most of the time, these guys don't run alone. So if you shoot one, there's probably 3 or 4 behind you didn't notice. And you're probably, if that's a true scenario, you're not going to get out of there alive. There's just no way. So I think Daniel's 100% right. You have to mentally prepare yourself. And if you think, you're going to be able to sit there and, take a bead down on one of these creatures, and shoot it and bring the body in and become, the next Bob Gimlin or whatever, it's not going to happen. I think we can all agree that there is no way on God's green earth you will ever get a body out of the woods. Would anyone care to refute my thoughts on that?
I don't think so. And I think for various reasons that wouldn't happen. But, I'm sure there are people out there that are steel-willed enough to hold their composure, but I don't think they're going to act in the way that they would think they would act, even if they were able to hold their composure. I think that for lack of a better way of saying it, I think the majesty of seeing one of these things, and I'm talking about Bigfoot specifically. I think Dogman's a different topic, but the majesty of actually looking one of these things in the eye would change your perspective. And that's also me trying to give a lot of credit to the human race.
Well, I know. I think that's well founded, Daniel, and simply because you don't know how you're going to react. I've heard stories where people they've got a gun barrel and they're staring down this thing from a scope, and they look at this thing and they're saying this thing can see them. And then they look into the eyes, they're like, it was too human. It was too much like a human. I couldn't do it. Or I felt like, what am I doing? Or they just have a complete change of heart. So you're 100% right. People aren't going to react the way they think they're going to react. You can train, you can do this, you can do that. The truth of the matter is, until that happens, you don't know how you're going to react. And, Daniel's always good for saying, I'm going to go up and pet one on the head. Just make sure you're videotaping it and see what happens. But I can see Daniel doing that. So, it's just one of those things. Until we get the opportunity, we're not going to know.
Yeah, no, the idea is very simple. I think anybody out there who has the balls to try and want to shoot one of these things, I often question their mental prosperity, because quite personally, what really intrigues me about people, and I get this a lot in social media, is that they feel threatened by these creatures, whether it's Bigfoots or Dogmen, and a Dogman especially. I can see why people would be intimidated a bit by a Dogman versus a Bigfoot, because, if the Dogman is going to demonstrate how to kill its chicken in front of you, personally, it's a very good example of a creature you don't want to mess with, but for the sake of how rabid and how vicious it looks, and going off of the book of judging a book by its cover, it's very easy for somebody, whether it is on a farm or if it is in the backyard of their house, that they want to get a gun and want to shoot something because they want to defend their property. Do you think that in the sense of defense that their mentalities go up a bit because they're trying to get an idea on what they're looking at, because they don't probably think that this thing is a bear. They think it's, or do you think maybe they think that these things might be like bears and that it's like almost like a natural instinct to defend?
Well, this is like, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but the truth of the matter is, if you've got a family that's running a farm and this is their sole income, and you've got some creatures that are just taking easy pickings and costing these people money. In my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, I think they have every right to defend their property and their livelihood. So if that means they got to take a couple pop shots at one of these things, that's fine. But I don't think for 1 second, you know, farmers are not yokels. They are very intelligent people. They are close to the earth. They know what's going on. They've seen, as someone that's been farming for a long time, they've pretty much seen it all that nature has to offer. And it's again, just from the people I've encountered that, I would, you could call in the agricultural field or farmers. If they believe in cryptids, they believe 100% because their grandfather told them they were real. Their great grandfather told them they were real, and they hear about the family experiences with them, and that they were either boogers, wood boogers, or haints, something, and they've been dealing with them their whole lives. So I think it's just one of those things where, again, I'm not trying to sound hypocritical, but if one of these cryptids is basically stealing a livelihood and taking food out of a family's mouth, then I think you have every right to defend yourself. But I don't think for 1 second they're having a misidentification. I think they know exactly what it is. But I also think they know how to deal with them, because if they know what they are, that means they probably had to deal with them at some point in the past, or their dad or their granddad or grandma or great grandma had to do with that. Does that make sense? So there's a family history on dealing with these cryptids that I'm sure they're pretty much involved in at some point in their lives.
Daniel, do you have anything to add on to that?
Not really. I mean, I agree that there's definitely less misidentification than what certain people want you to believe. In regards to Dogman, I can definitely see how people would be more immediately threatened just because of the way he looks. I mean, he's described as a overly muscular werewolf. That would scare anybody, and that would trigger the fight or flight response. And typically it's defend and save your own hind end. I think the difference with Dogman and Bigfoot is Bigfoot's more humanistic. But when you're talking about protecting your home, your crops, your livelihood, yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand it. But in most of those cases, when you hear reports of that, a Bigfoot will only take a certain portion and leave a certain portion. It's like they're sharing. It's like, okay, I'm gonna take this because you're here and I'm allowing you to be here. So this is my payment, but here I'm gonna leave you enough for yourself too. And I think it's all about a mutual habitation in those instances.
No, I agree with you. I think you're right. I mean, you talk some of these like old farmers that have been farming their whole lives and they're like fourth or fifth generation farmers. I spoke to a guy and he told me point blank, to this day, he still plants 2 gardens in spring. He plants one by the wood line for the boogers. It's a booger garden. And then he plants his not too far away. And the booger garden, they take what they want and they usually leave his stuff alone. So I mean, again, it's about adaptation. I think you're right. You gotta, it's got to be parsimonious. If you can find a way to live with these creatures, then do it. But I don't think, again, defending yourself and your property and your family, that's one thing. And I'm talking about like when there's no other choice. These things are knocking on your door, they're killing your livestock. That's the kind of situation I'm talking about. But Daniel's right. Um, again, I don't have permission to use his name, but I've got a dear friend of mine. He's been doing this for 45, 47 years. And he's telling me point blank that, even when he was a kid, the livestock would disappear, but it would never be more than what would hurt them. So, I do. I think they're intelligent enough to know that, hey, we're going to take our cut, but we're not going to really affect, you know, this guy over here and his family, because I'm a firm believer they know exactly what a family unit is. I think they're a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for, and I think that's one of the reasons why they've able to be sort of looking for incognito for so long. Now I know there's the whole government conspiracy thing and all that too, because I also believe that there's a large organization that is very well aware of these creatures, but the fact that they can kind of make themselves disappear in their own element does not hurt their anonymity.
Well, there's also another aspect to that too. If you have a farm and it's easy pickings, it's easy food, and it's regular food, I think they're smart enough to know that, well, I need to leave them enough and keep them happy. So this will keep production up and keep me happy.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think they're, unless there's a vendetta, because I've also heard about xenocephaly and Bigfoot just going in and killing all livestock and not doing anything with it, just killing it to kill it. But again, that's probably special circumstances. But I think they're smart enough to realize that they know if they kill everything, there's not going to be anything left for them too.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and I think elements of how many people go about encounters or deal with certain encounters plays a factor. And when we talk about cases where the human being might be in danger, do you guys have an overall opinion on some of these related incidents in Bigfoot attacks or Dogman attacks on people? And I'm referring to certain cases such as Ape Canyon for Bigfoot or Land Between the Lakes for reported Dogman.
Well, Ape Canyon, there's a few versions of Ape Canyon that I've heard, and in one of them, a couple of the guys saw one of the Sasquatches during the day, and then you started taking pop shots at him. And another one they allegedly shot, and it fell off a 350-foot cliff, and that's when the Ape Canyon incident happened. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know. But I think what has to happen is there has to be an event. There has to be a sentinel event that happens before the cryptids react. I just don't think they're going to see someone and just start messing with them. I think something has to happen. I think they're either going to be shot at, hit. They might have been one of their tribe or pack may have been hit with a car and they were able to follow it. Whatever the case is. I think there's always an event that precipitates an action from a cryptid. Now, I could be wrong. I just don't think I am. It just, to me, that would make sense because it's one of those things where if you get the wrath of, just say, a pack of xenocephali, all right, what did you do to have that happen? Don't sit there and say, oh, we didn't do anything. We weren't doing anything, because I don't believe that. I don't think they're just going to randomly pick someone and start, attacking them or harassing them or doing whatever. So I think if there is an attack, it's probably in retribution for something that already occurred.
Yeah, I agree. It's about incursion. It's about something negative happening. And you've got to think about it too, that they could just be protecting their own home, their own hunting grounds, just like we would. And there again, that goes back into the incursion. I don't think it's just blatant maliciousness. I think there's a reason behind it. And we as humans, we really don't cohabitate well. I mean, just to be honest, we don't. And I wholeheartedly agree with what Christian said.
Talk about a case, though, where, give or take, somebody who is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they encounter a very aggressive Sasquatch. Do you feel like these creatures do give out warnings to people before they pursue an attack, very similar to how we operate as human beings when we feel threatened and we give out threat and warning?
I
Most
mean,
likely.
yeah, I agree with Tiny. I mean, I think it's most likely is the best answer because the truth is, we're not experts on their behavior patterns, and anyone that says they are, again, where'd you get your credentials? But to me, it would make sense because these creatures know that the second they, get in an entanglement with a human being, there's going to be more to follow. And I think they also know that, human beings have the ability to kill them. So I think, and again, it depends, the circumstances have to dictate the actions, but I think they think a lot more before they act where it comes to humans,
Yeah.
specifically these days. I think it's different nowadays. 100 years ago, it didn't matter. If someone disappeared hunting, they disappeared hunting. Now we've got the technology to go out and track where they were, look for them, cell phones, drones, hunting dogs, search parties, all these abilities, FLIR, helicopters, everything. So I think that kind of changed technology, changed that for them. If I'm verbalizing that properly on what I mean by saying that things changed for them, better for us, but not for them if they were to do harm on a human being.
I think the real issue would be that we wouldn't know that they're giving us that warning. Um, I mean, think about a rattlesnake, for instance. We know how they warn us, but we had to learn that the hard way. And with encounters between Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever, it's so far and few between and so disbelieved that nobody's really paying it attention. So if I'm out in the woods and I happen to come across a Sasquatch with PMS, and they're like, I just don't like the way you look today. Get out of my area. And they start warning me. I don't necessarily know that's what's happening unless it's a truly aggressive nature, like a great ape when they charge and slap the ground, yell, things like that. Um, but I think probably in the beginning it's more subtle than that. And then of course it goes into the rock throws or the yells, things like that. I think it's probably after it's escalated.
Yeah, I have to agree with Daniel on that one. I think it depends on what their definition of warning you is. I mean, if you have an alpha that's in a bad mood, and I believe they're prone to have moods, uh, you might get a grunt, and that's it. Or you get a boulder hucked at your head, or chucked at your head. It doesn't. We don't know. Again, it chalks up to those things. We don't know what their determination of a warning is. I think if you have the ability to decipher it while you're out in the woods, I think there's been times where Daniel and I have been growled at, and let me tell you something. This what when you're being growled at, and when it's time to turn around and leave. And I think if you get a warning like that, then you're much better off than just an unknown kind of signal, if that makes sense.
Now, Chris, at the chance of sounding kind of woo woo, and I use that term affectionately, when you're in an area that you're not wanted or you're not supposed to be, you can feel it. I mean,
I agree. I agree
the
100%.
the energy in the area changes, and this is where my paranormal background comes in, but everything around us is in a vibrational state, and we're sensitive to that. Just like when you walk into a room and you immediately focus on a person and go, there's something wrong with that person. I don't like that person. That's because of that. It's a negative vibration to you. Or the whole room, you can walk into a room and you feel that tension in a room, and you're like, man, something either just happened or something's getting ready to happen. It's the same out there. You can feel it. That's why one of the things that when we investigate is I try to stay very, very in tune to the way the forest feels, the sounds. You can hear it. Are birds hollering? Are frogs and crickets, are they yelling? Things like that. You've got to stay very in tune. And there's a difference in the forest getting quiet because it's listening, and it getting quiet because something's getting ready to hit the fan. Does that make sense? I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I'm okay.
No, I agree. That's
I agree
exactly
as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know what something's gonna. You can feel it. You can. And there's a difference between, some things getting quiet because you're around, and the entire forest it's like someone turns a switch off and shuts everything off. So there's a big difference. And I think, Daniel's right. I think all animals know when the alpha predator is around. And I think that's when they go into, I'm going to be quiet now because I don't want to get killed mode. So I think that's why you get that silence. But I agree with Daniel. I mean, I think when it's time to leave. I think we've been lucky several times, Daniel, because I think you and I both looked at each other at the same time saying, okay, time to leave. Because I mean, that's happened. That exact same scenario has played out many times for me and the other people I investigate with, including Daniel. So I think that's actually an exemplary example of what you have to do. You have to pay attention to your gut instincts, specifically if you're out there and something like that happens. There's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I'm looking for it. I want that to happen." Okay, okay, keep talking. Again, that's before the incident will happen. You don't know how you're going to react, and that's usually before the crying, the screaming, and the running starts. So, I mean, you have to listen. I guess the best way to say that is, Daniel, you got to listen to nature. Would you say that? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all have an intuition that most of us don't listen to. And, regardless of the type of investigation that you're doing, your gut is your single best tool. And there's been many a times I walked into, a paranormal investigation, and I knew that, well, this one's going to get nasty because, when it comes to a paranormal investigation, I've dealt with some pretty nasty stuff. I get rid of it. And you can feel it immediately. And the same applies in the forest. You can feel it. There's an energy. I mean, I know that it sounds woo-woo, but there's an energy.
I mean, I agree with you because I've felt it. I mean, I know what you're talking about, especially if something nefarious is about to happen. You definitely feel it.
I have to agree with a lot of what you guys said because, and personally, one of the reasons, and this is a pretty interesting experience, and I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on it. When I went to the Pine Barrens to go over an investigation because I know somebody who's close to me who had an experience with a reported dogman, and when we went to the Barrens to go and try to investigate and look, it was pretty ominous, and it was a very unnerving feeling. I felt very nauseous. I didn't feel easy. I felt very uncomfortable, and it's almost like it was like a channeling, not just of my negative emotions of what I was thinking in this particular region, but I felt like these were the emotions that something was nearby that was signaling those, giving that channeling, as if it was trying to say, get out of here without showing its face. What do you guys make of that?
I think you were picking up on the energy change. I think you were picking up on the very, very strong feelings of either an alpha predator or a cryptid. Again, Daniel said, listen to your instincts. A lot of people have them. Everyone has them. A lot of people don't listen to them. I tell people on every investigation we do, if they're asking I said, listen to what your gut tells you. Your gut's never going to lead you wrong. So if your gut says it's time to get out of Dodge, then leave. I don't care if people think you're a coward. I don't care if people think you're scared. If your gut's telling you to leave, then you leave. And there's a reason why your gut's telling you that. I believe that, all humans have the ability to know when danger's present. You might be picking up on a pheromone. You could be picking up on different energy. The truth is, I don't know why we can do it. I don't know if it's instinctual. I don't know if it's something that's been, bred into humanity from our inception. But I also believe that everyone knows when trouble's brewing. And if you want to deal with that trouble, that's fine. But if your body's telling you, or if your gut instinct's telling you, or if the force is telling you, whatever's telling you to get out of there, I suggest you listen to that. So you probably came close to having an encounter with something, Chris.
Well, you know, in the Barrens, there's a lot more up there than just cryptids too. It's hard to say what you may have ran into.
That's very true. I mean, I've been there. People don't realize how big the Barrens are, Chris. No, they think in
Heavy
New Jersey,
understatement.
they're
They
not
don't
thinking
know.
that there's this huge arboreal, pine forest. I
It's
mean,
also
aren't the
divided in
Barrens like the size of
between.
Maryland?
What'd you say, Christian? I'm sorry.
Aren't the Barrens basically square mileage? Aren't they about the same size as Maryland?
Oh, they're huge. And one thing I was
Yeah.
going to say was that people often think that the Pine Barrens is just one national region. It's in Pemberton Township, New Jersey, but it extends all throughout the state of New Jersey. I mean, the Bass River Forest, the Wharton State Forest, being the Bella Pine, also being another region of pine barrens. It's all over the place. And keep in mind too that even in the barrens, there's you mentioned about other things besides cryptids. We talk about satanic cults and mysterious people in the woods, and there's also there's some ruins in certain parts of the woods like hermits and stuff live in, and there's also dealing with people there who are heavy drug addicts who go into some of these places and just hide. So there's a whole bunch of danger besides animals, Bigfoots, and dogmen in the barrens. I always tell people, even like you guys mentioned, going into the woods unarmed is probably the most dumbest thing you can do.
I won't. The only time we've ever done like a real hardcore investigation is when we were just doing a photo op, and the area in which we were researching or investigating or being cryptid detectives in just happened to have a scheduled cleanup from the parks department. So myself, Daniel, and another associate of ours, we were all armed, but we were like, man, I don't want to. And because the truth of the matter is, we were taking pictures for the website. We were just looking for different kinds of shots, different. This is kind of areas. It was all just, I guess, what would you call it, Daniel? Background photos, things like that, just for
Yeah, we were
yeah,
just looking for stock stuff.
just stop. Thank you, stop. And we ended up just by happenstance. Uh, we found some of the best evidence I think we've had in the last 2 years, and it just made us go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think within 2 hours, we were probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 miles in the middle of nowhere. And we had an incident where, had we been armed, I think we probably would have been better off. But the truth of the matter is, none of us were armed, and we ended up doing the old hands up and walking backwards, and just kind of putting the head down and walking out. Uh, and I think at that point in time, we were lucky we were able to do that. So I think being armed is not necessarily going to 100% save you. But my thing is this: I don't think cryptids like loud noises. And my first instinct would not be to shoot at something if it was coming at us. I would probably just pop a few in the air just to scare them with the noise. That would be my. I think that's probably would be Daniel's first instinct too. And if that didn't work, then we'd have to go to Plan B. But I think the noise itself, especially as acute as their hearing is, I think the noise itself would be enough to probably drive them off. So I think then that's something that we've always talked about. But again, you don't know how you're going to react until it happens. So I can't sit there and say, "Oh, I would never do this. I'd never shoot at one." Blah blah blah. I just don't know. I would hope that I would have the mindset enough not to do it. But if one of my friends is getting charged, or Tiny's in the lurch, or something's going to happen, or something's going to jump on him, or I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make sure my friends and I walk out of there. And I'm not trying to say I'm a big bad guy. That's not my thing, because I don't know. My luck, I'd probably be talking to Tiny, turn right around, and then walk into a dog man, and boom, it's game over for me. So it's just one of those things. You just never know what's going to happen, but you just have to be as ready as I guess you just have to be prepared, like the old Boy Scout. You have to be prepared, and you have to be prepared all the time. And a lot of people these days, I don't think they go prepared enough in the woods. You know, I talked to a guy not too long ago, nice guy, very intelligent, educated, very articulate. And he tells me about, he's this area he's hiking. He's asking me some advice. And I'm like, okay, well, number one, never go alone. I said, number two, I said, you have a concealed weapons permit? He's like, well, no. I said, well, maybe you should get one of those. And, before you go into this area, get your concealed weapons permit, get someone you can trust to come with you, make sure they're armed. And I said, definitely have a GPS, bring a cell phone, bring a camera. But I always tell everyone, Chris, too, and Tiny's seen me do this a million times. I say, bring a compass and then bring a spare compass, a real compass, not a digital compass on your phone. All right. You need tangibility. You need a real compass. You know how to use it. The other thing I always tell everyone to bring is make sure you got a whistle with you. All right. Always have a whistle. How easy is it to find someone, blowing a whistle in the middle of nowhere? It's easier to hone in on that than someone just screaming because that whistle is very distinct. So and again, these are just a few things, we always have on us whenever we go, even if we're 10 feet in the woods, these are things we have with us. And we have a numerous amount of other things. I mean, we have, uh, UHF, VHF radios. We have stuff. We're very prepared. And we've got the repeater stations all programmed in to whatever area we're into too. So things like that just help you be prepared. I'm a huge David Paulides fan. I think David Paulides has done the world a great service with his books. And if memory serves, and I hope I don't say this wrong, but he's always said that if you carry three things, it's a firearm, a GPS, and what's the other one, Tiny? A phone?
Probably something to start a fire with.
No, but it's in all the cases that if you have three specific things, and Chris, I'm sorry, buddy, I'm just not prepared for what they are, but I believe it's a firearm, a GPS, and a phone. He said that's probably the and never go alone, of course. He said I think he's several times he's commented on that. I could be wrong on the phone. It might be something else, but the phone's jumping in my head for some reason. But if you have a firearm and that GPS transponder, I think you're and know where you're going. And I think it might be a phone or a map. It's probably one of those two or a conjunction of both. And again, please forgive me for not being 100% articulate on that. I wasn't thinking about saying that, but I think if people want to spend a lot of time in the woods, I think it would behoove them greatly to pick up all of David Paulides' books and read them because there's just an incredible amount of knowledge in there. I mean, the guy knows what he's talking about. So, but for us, when we go in, it's always safety first. And when you're in the Barrens and you're alone and you're having that feeling and you're unarmed, that's a recipe for disaster. So I think you did the right thing, brother. That's my long way of saying you did the right thing.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And personally, I do go into the woods armed. So it's not like I do go into some place without any protection, and no need to apologize at all in reference to the David Paulides three things, because I don't even know the three things. I know about the whole. I know about being armed, one, I believe, and then I don't know the rest. I don't really follow David, believe it or not. I do follow what he does do, and it does allude to a couple of questions I do have in reference to Bigfoot and Dogman in national parks, but yeah, no need to apologize. I personally think it's interesting, to say the least, that people do not go into the woods unarmed. It's weird because it's like it's not even just the idea of going into the woods thinking I'm going to go for a nice hike, but along the way I might run into a mountain lion or a bear. People forget where they live, and migration always happens. We've had more black bear pop up around my area than in the last 20 years when I was around, and it's weird, and migration does play a role where the food goes. And when people don't often go into the woods without any weapon, or even if it's just like a pocket knife, it's scary to think. And when I ask this in all honesty, no bullshit, but like, do you really think that some of these cases with the missing 411, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, Daniel, are just related to not Bigfoot or Dogman, but actually just people who, because they're so irresponsible in the woods, they just disappear and injure themselves, or possibly worse?
Absolutely. I think that there's probably at least an equal number of those missing cases are just people that have gotten in trouble, not been prepared. I mean, it's easy to do. You can go into any of these national forests and walk half a mile in and be completely lost if you're not prepared. Some people don't have that sense of direction that some people have. I grew up in the woods, so I can navigate in the woods easily. It's like my second home, and not everybody has that ability. So you can go in, you get turned around, you step in a hole, you break your ankle, you're in trouble. You're in real trouble. And it doesn't take long. And there's a lot of animals out there that are going to take advantage of that meat that's laying there. Now, it's not to say that all of them are that, but yeah, I really honestly believe that a fair majority are just people that have gotten in trouble.
I'd say it's probably about 98%, man. I honestly, and the reason why I say that is just Daniel just said it specifically, and there's really nothing else I can say to it except the fact that people overestimate their abilities. Now, I'm good in the woods because I grew up in the woods myself. I've been in Appalachia my whole life. And I don't worry about me because anytime we go out, we have at any given time materials for fire, protection, batteries, flashlights, a compass, a backup compass. Usually, even sometimes even 3 compasses. We've got maps. We know where we're going. We've told people where we're going. I even go as far as to, I'll take a beat off of where we park and put that in the map function of the phone. So even if the GPS isn't working, it's still, we kind of know where we're going. But people don't do that, man. They don't think they need it. They're more concerned with carrying, a gallon of water in their camel pack than they are with having a knife and a ferrous rod to start a fire, or some water purification tablets, or a granola bar, or an extra pair of socks, gloves. Most people, it surprises me how many people don't bring gloves while they hike, or they don't have any rope, or it's a myriad of things. And if you think about it, it's the simplest stuff that you need. I use a walking stick. On my walking stick, I'm actually looking at it right now. On my walking stick, I've got 150 feet of 850 paracord on there. It's marked off. I know how deep someone's going to be. I've got a compass in the stock. I mean, that's just one of the things we have. And we always carry knives. We've got backup knives. A knife is a very basic tool that you really need out there, regardless. But people think, hey, we're only going for this little hike. We don't need this, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to carry this. I don't want to carry that. I don't like guns, things like that. And I think that's what gets people in trouble. And I really think they rely too much on the technology. I think people don't realize that you're not going to have cell signal in a lot of these places. Your battery's going to die faster because it's constantly searching out for a signal. And you're also taking pictures and taking video and trying to upload this, that, and the other thing. Your battery in your phone is going to die quick. And now you have no compass. Now you have no idea where you are. And that's why these bad things happen. So I think, Daniel's very, accurate in his portrayal of what happens. Is some of it cryptid related? I'm sure. I'm sure some of it is. But, I don't know an example off the top of my head that I could say is 100% cryptid related. Again, we just don't know. But I think most of it comes from being ill prepared.
Well, and there's also a little bit more morbid thought process too. Is there's a lot of people hiding in the woods.
Yeah. Well, I try not to think like, I don't want to. I don't like saying stuff like that because,
well, I mean, truth is truth. There's people out there. There's people that are very nefarious out there, and there's also people out there that are going to take advantage of meat when they see it. So, but you're talking about some really, deep woods when you're talking about that. But there are a lot of things out there.
No, there are, and again, I think I'm thinking of a time where you and I ran into some people, and their attitude severely changed the second they saw we were both armed. one individual had a shovel, and I actually thought he was getting ready to swing the shovel at Tiny in one of our little adventures and our excursions. So again, being armed, sometimes you just don't have to say anything. They just see it and they're like, "Oh, hello, different story." And I think that's helpful. But again, it just depends. It depends, but you have to be prepared. I don't think we would have half of these stories if people were 100% prepared. And Tiny's right. People slip, they fall, they break an ankle, or they twist their knee, they do something, and they get hurt, they get disorientated, you know, uh, and then they don't make it back out, or they start freaking out. A lot of people don't stay where they start moving when they should stay where they are, and wait for help. I read about a case not too long ago where they didn't even send out a search party because the person wasn't even expected back for a week. And had they known where he was like 3 or 4 days prior, he would have been, fine. But I think a lot of it has to be with communication, and a lot of it has to do with being prepared. Uh, I'm a firm believer that you need to tell someone if you're going out off trail and you're in the middle of the woods, even if it's a great place to find cryptids or evidence or whatever you're looking for, you still need to tell someone where it is. That's the thing, and a lot of people don't do that. Because they don't want to give up their secrets. And it's like, well, what good's a secret going to do you if something happens to you out there?
Well, talking about secrets too, you've got to think we still have a lot of shiners out in these woods.
Yeah.
We have people out here growing huge fields of pot, and you run up on them, they'll make you disappear.
Yeah, they're not going to be happy.
It's very easy for somebody, especially when they're growing narcotics or whatever, to proceed to make anything expendable. It's just, I hate the truth. And then, we talk about truth. I mean, there are people out there, even that's why, like, when I say the Barons, the Satanist cult, there's been people who've reportedly seen the most heinous of things that happen in those woods. And I'm no surprise to me in any neck of the woods, whether it's in Yellowstone or whether it is in a very populated park, that someone or some psychopath out there is going to kill somebody. It's very easy. There are people who are in the woods to begin with, and I know, not to scare nobody, but like, even in what Daniel said, when it comes to truth, I mean, there are people out there for whatever reason, whether it's just to scare people or if they got an agenda. There was a case I read of someone who just was in the woods and just wanted to shoot people for fun. And it's scary to think about that. But, I mean, it happens. That's why anybody should go into the woods unarmed is the most ridiculous of things you need to do. And it's hard.
I don't understand that, because even if you take the human element out of it, you've got snakes, bears, a little bit lower than us, there's alligators. You never know what you're going to run into in a swampy area. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Mountain lions. Cougars. It doesn't. The list goes on and on and on. We're starting to get a population of coyotes around here that are becoming a menace. And that's not. Oh, it's just a small dog. Don't worry about it. Well, when there's 12 or 14 of them, yeah, you got a problem. So I mean, I don't understand that either. It's a safety measure. You don't ever have to pull it out. You don't ever have to shoot anything if you don't want to. But it's nice to know you've got it if you need
it. Christian, I'm a single man. I wouldn't mind running into a cougar.
And Chris, that's an example of a tiny joke right there. That is something I live with.
I like it. It sinks in a little bit, though. I'm not going to lie. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, raunchy as yes, but I mean, at the end of the day, too, if you really think about it, compared to what these Sasquatches or Dogmen can do, I think cougar might be a bit of an expendable thing comparison. I mean, it takes one shot, one kill, but at the same time, I mean, that is if, she's vicious. Real quick, if I might emphasize a bit, though, when it comes to Bigfoots and Dogmen, and to allude a little bit back to some of the more ideology type things when it comes to these cryptids, what about the idea that these creatures can do anything a human can do, such as pick up an axe, a hatchet, and to go to an extent, when I say it, possibly opening a car door or being able to observe a gun?
Do I think they can do it?
Yeah, and if so,
Yep.
or is that just like an exaggeration, do you think?
No, I definitely think that. I mean, there was a report not too. Oh goodness, I just heard this the other day, and I'm not sure what channel it was on. And again, I don't like giving other people's names or podcasts out if I don't have permission. So if I had permission, I'd give it, but I don't. But there was an example of a dog man opening up a door. I think they observe us. I think they're intelligent. I think they observe us. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say that the Bigfoot twisted their doorknob. And again, it all goes down to this: if they wanted in, they'd be in. I mean, if you're a 12-foot, 2,000-pound North American primate, uh, and there's only a 2-inch wooden door stopping you from getting what you want, there's really nothing stopping you from getting what you want. So I think again, it's just that discovery. They're curious. I don't know if an example like that would be an example of someone wanting to get, or an example of a Bigfoot wanting to do harm to someone. Because again, I'm a firm believer. If they want in, they're going to come in. They know how a window breaks. They know how, they've seen doors open. They know how a car door opens. They observe us. I think we're their entertainment. And when they're watching us, they're learning. So they see where we are. That's why I think, when the male disappears from his residence and the female starts having problems with Sasquatch, that's because the Sasquatch knows that the male's gone. The second the male comes back, there's no problems. So I mean, that's because he's been observing, or that's just. And again, that's just an example. So I think they're very observant. I think they can do pretty much. I think they can pick up an axe. I don't think they would really need to, but I think they can pick up an axe if they wanted to. I think they can open up a door. I think uh, I think if they were so inclined, they could probably rip the door off the car body if they wanted to. But I think there's something that keeps them, at bay a lot of the time. Again, I think it depends on their anger level. Like if they're raging, they're going to do, they're just going to destroy everything in their path. And I think, it just depends on what precipitates the events. If they're just curious and they want to try opening a door, I've also heard that too. And again, that might be a juvenile thing. You know what I'm saying? So we just don't know. But I definitely believe they can do it.
I absolutely do. Well, I mean, you hear old stories of natives trading goods with them. So yeah, I think they're more than capable. And if you think about it, how many bears have been spotted opening car doors?
Well, there was just a report 2 days ago on the news of a bear opening up a door around here in Nashville and getting in the car, and it was on tape. I mean, they videoed it.
Yeah, and then we look at apes and things like that using tools, and I think Squatch are much more intelligent than the great apes. So yeah, I think I honestly I don't even think that's a question. I think they're more than capable.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I love to see that tape of the bear opening the door. But furthermore, the next couple questions are not meant to be goofy, but rather more asked out of curiosity, a little inquisitive. With creatures like Bigfoot, like how do they respond to food? How do you think they respond to food? Now, what I mean by that, and not necessarily like, let's just say, for example, we know that they go after normal mammals such as raccoons, elk, anything that is above their weight and that is considered good predatory food. But if you were to give like these creatures berries or like a McDonald's sandwich, and I'm not saying it to be funny, but like I'm saying out of curiosity, like do they react any different? Because I've often heard cases of them reacting to berries as if it's like shrooms. And I don't know how accurate or how crazy that might sound, but it's almost like, how do they react to some of our foods or anything versus foods like mammals?
I think they are sugar addicts. I've got a friend of mine whose name I can't use, who has told me point blank that once they've had sugar, it is like a drug to them. I have never heard anything about the berry situation as far as them acting like it's a drug for them. But how many reports of a Bigfoot in a berry patch? I mean, that goes back in the historic record. So I believe that they're very much omnivores. I think they're going to eat whatever they can eat when they're around. It probably takes a lot to keep one of these guys moving every day. But I think as far as like eating some Mickey D's, it would probably get them sick. It's nothing against Mickey D's. It's just I don't think the systems are designed to eat that kind of stuff. But I've been told by various people, but one person that I trust utmost that he's told me point blank, sugar is like a drug for them. And if they're expecting it from you, if you give them sugar once or something like sweet donuts, donuts like glazed donuts, or any kind of sugar cereal or a candy bar or something like that, that is how trouble starts. Because once they get it and they want more and they don't get it, they go looking for where it came from. And if you don't give it to them, then they're going to have a hissy fit and destroy stuff. So I think the reaction as far as like berries and stuff, I'm sure that's normal. But anything with a high sugar content, I think would probably tend to get you in trouble with them eventually. As for like McDonald's or something like that, I don't even know if they'd eat it. I don't know. I don't know. There's ways that things are processed and they might give off a different smell and they might not even eat it. I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to walk away from, a Big Mac. I'm not going to do that, or some fries, because, I've been eating them my whole life and I'm going to continue to eat them. But if you take something that's completely out of nature, that's had nothing but food provided by nature, that's never been processed or anything else, that might not appeal to them. So I'm just guessing that they might not even eat it. But the sugar thing is where I would say would definitely be an issue.
So you got to think too. I believe that genetically they're probably really close to us,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to think of what these things do to us. And you talk about sugars, chocolate, things like that in particular, and the endorphins that it releases. It's like a drug for us. And you take an animal that's never had anything processed like that, any of that processed sugar, and you give it to them, that release is probably going to be pretty big. And it would make sense to get an addiction to it. I mean, we have addictions to sugar because of that same endorphin release. So
I'm
makes
with you.
sense.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you because I'll be honest with you. I can't, if I'm near Reese's peanut butter cups, I've got to eat them. So, and I have access to them. And so if I've never had sugar before and that's the first thing I've tried, I mean, what kind of sugar rush are you going to get? Honestly, I mean, that's a good point, Daniel.
Be like taking that first shot of caffeine,
Exactly.
something like that. But, as far as the processed foods, like you were talking about with McDonald's, things like that, I would imagine that would be kind of akin to, say, if a human had been a vegan for 15 years and then all of a sudden ate a steak, their body is going to kind of reject it, you know? And I mean, just because of how we process that type of food and the amount of grease and
Mm-hmm.
preservatives and all the crap that we put in food, they may not touch it. I don't know, but the sugars are different. We know sugars are different.
Can't deny it's pretty good food, though. I mean, if they were to reject it, it would be interesting to watch, but it'd also be a bit hilarious considering this creature devouring food like a human being, if not worse. But um, I bring that up essentially because you mentioned a good point, Daniel, as well as you, Christian, in reference to how the human system takes certain foods. And mind you, I don't eat, I'm not a vegan, but I do eat a variety of certain foods. And I can tell you that when there was a period of time where I stopped eating fast food, that I stopped for about maybe 2 or 3 years, and then I had one day a Big Mac, and my body rejected it. It was awful. And I can imagine if Bigfoot would or Dogman would react the same way, that they themselves would probably feel very sick. And it's not easy to come by, especially if it's processed food. No matter how good it is, these creatures, I feel, are too close to us as humans than many might think.
No, I agree with you.
Now, I do want to emphasize on something here because and this is for many people out there that might think it's a bunch of bullshit. It's not, because you can look it up yourself, and I'm sure you guys are very much aware of it. In the late '80s, there was this bear that got into some drugs, and it was hooked on coke, and it was like wild. And the bear itself, eventually it died because of the amount it took in. But the reason why I ask and say this is because, is it very easy for a cryptid, and I know because we don't necessarily have an answer to it because of the research aspect of it, but do you feel that, like, much so in a sugar rush or in general, like that they'd react as almost like a normal human being who is a bit under the influence of drugs and react very negatively? Or would it smooth them in a sense?
I think you're right. I think they'd react like a regular human being would be on drugs.
I think they probably would, but I think as far as the reaction they would have to it, well, I don't know. I want to say it would depend on the mood and the surrounding when they got into it. But if, say, it's a hallucinogenic, for instance, it's probably going to scare them, and then that flight or fight response kicks in, and they're going to probably tear up Jack just because they're seeing stuff, you know.
Evidently, as you know, they don't necessarily speak the same language we speak. So take in the idea of a psychedelic drug such as mushrooms, and you mentioned, Daniel, it scares them. But would there, in a sense, would they perhaps, because their bodies react to it a certain way, because their genes might be a bit different than ours? I mean, obviously, if we take in a large amount of drugs, and I'm not encouraging it or in general saying it for the point being, but as you know, if you take in a certain amount, you can easily kill yourself. Do you feel that they could do the same thing themselves under a certain drug, depending on the circumstances of their body genes, their biology?
Well, that's likely, but I think you've also got to take into account in a situation like mushrooms, for instance. You know, there's animals out here. Squirrels are a good example. That will only eat half of a buckeye because half of it's poison. They just know, and I think for a natural drug like a mushroom, I think they would know that it's something to either stay away from or that they're aware of and would probably do it recreationally. But I think anything that they overdo, I think, yeah, they could probably kill themselves. I mean, look at cats and catnip. They can't leave it alone. We have to actually take it away from them. So the question really is, do you think they have the self control to not overdo it? And that would go right back to, well, how intelligent are they really?
I mean, that's true, but that there's also been reports of, like, them breaking into stills and eating all the mash. I think they're just they're looking for food, and if they had this stuff one time and they knew they felt good afterwards, then maybe they're going to try it again. I think it's just kind of experimentation with them, but I think they're also very intelligent and they know what's going to do what to them.
Yeah, I have to say the same thing. It rolls both many ways. I think the big thing out of all of it, though, is the idea that people do respond to it in a certain way, because it is very passy to explain, especially because we don't have all the answers. But it is a good thing to think about, considering that these creatures, there are similarities between us and them, but there is that missing link. And I think that that is a big drawn in line. And that is also gone on with the same debate with primates. But I want to ask you guys a bit of controversial questions now, because I think it's important to kind of just hear what you guys really have to say about this. Why is it so easy to have people be misinformed in research, whether it's Bigfoot or Dogman? Tell me why.
because people listen to people that aren't quote unquote experts, that try to produce themselves or try to promote themselves as experts, and they will say something that may or may not be true depending on what it's about. And then you have someone that will listen to them, and they're not thinking this guy might not be 100% legit, or this person might not be 100% legit. They're just thinking, well, someone said it must be true. Because they're not doing their research. Credibility in the cryptid world is a very hard thing to come by. Even if you are 100% honest and you've never falsified information, or you've never said something that wasn't true, eventually someone's going to say something negative about you just because they can. So I think that's probably what happens, is there's just a lot of disinformation out there, or people might hear a story that's completely fiction and think that it's legit. So I mean, it's probably a combination of a bunch of different things, but I don't think people are, intentionally trying to, lead people down the wrong path. But I think some stuff that happens may be in conjunction with other stuff, and it just falls into place, and that's where the misinformation comes from.
I think for a person to be misinformed is as much their own responsibility as who they listen to. I think it boils down to what you want to believe. For instance, you may want to believe that Sasquatch is just a feral creature, no intelligence, just this undiscovered ape. I, on the other hand, may want to believe that Sasquatch is super intelligent, spiritual, so forth and so on. You are going to seek out the references that point to what you want to believe.
Yeah,
I'm going to seek out the references that validate what I want to believe. And that's human nature. We believe what we want to believe. We believe what feels right. And what feels right to you may not feel right to me. And when you're talking about anything paranormal, there's not enough hardcore evidence for somebody to say, no, you're wrong. Because we don't know. It just boils down to that. We have no idea. We have speculation. We have experiences, but those experiences validate certain things. But those certain things that they validate are vague. So there's still a lot of room for us to believe whatever we want to believe. And that's what's going to happen. I think that's where a lot of the misinformation comes from. And I believe what I believe, so I'm going to write a book about it. Somebody else is going to read that book and say, you know what, that strikes home. And it snowballs. I think that's where the misinformation comes from.
I mean, I agree with that. I think people are going to believe what they want to believe. That's where, you get your different camps. You get people that think that Bigfoot is transdimensional. You get people that think that it's, just a no good varmint and it's just here to kill everyone. You get things like that. So they're going to believe what they want to believe. Tiny's exactly right. And they seek out like-minded people. I mean, we all do, right? That's just human nature.
It's kind of why we're here talking tonight. We're all like-minded.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to agree with that. And another thing is that often, as I've recalled, when it comes to belief system, and I feel that this is where we get off the rails too, and something that I don't agree with is we take one belief system, and it happens a lot with people, and nothing against anybody's religion or anybody's beliefs, but I feel that sometimes we mix together what we read in the Bible with what these creatures are. And what I mean by that is when people say that these things are demons or a Nephilim or something of a relic, dire wolves or things that are just a demonic nature, things that are just pure evil. I have a problem with that. I don't know what you guys feel about that, but I personally don't think because what we hear in the Bible or think of in the Bible is the same of what we see as cryptids.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the Nephilim and the fallen ones, or or the the mix or amalgamation or the hybrids of the angelic and human. And you have to, if you're going to talk about that, then you have to talk about Genesis 6. And then, you're talking about the Nephilim and the giants. And then, it goes into all that. A lot of people believe that the Bigfoot and the Cynocephali are remnants of that age. And again, it's one of those things, Chris. I'd be honest with you. 10 years ago, if you would ask me if I thought that was even feasible, I would have laughed at you and said, absolutely not. And now I have to put it up and it's possible. The more I research these creatures and the more information I obtain, instead of finding more and more answers, I get more and more questions. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not speaking for Daniel. Daniel, he can speak for himself, but I'm pretty sure he's probably the same kind of mindset on these guys. I mean, again, Tiny, I'm not trying to speak for you, so please feel free to pipe in.
Well, I think the word evil in itself, people tend to just use for things that they don't understand. And in this case, it's something we have no clue about. So obviously it's evil. We've been bred that way. We've been taught that way. And it's hard to take, centuries of teaching out of the blood, so to speak. But you're right. We use what we believe to explain what we can understand. And that's not always right. Now, as far as what Bigfoot, Dogman, what they actually are, I have no idea. I keep an open mind. Until I see proof of it, I can't say that it's not. So, could it be a dimensional thing? Yeah, could be. Could it be just an ape? Yeah, could be. I have my own thoughts about it. I don't believe it's just an ape, but yes, we use what we've taught. We've been taught. We use what is ingrained. Anything to latch on to an explanation. We as a race, it's inbred into us that we have to have an explanation for everything. We have to understand it. So we make up whatever we can to understand it. We can't just let it go and think, well, that's really weird. I don't know. So we have to explain it. That's where science comes in. And think about all the things that we thought were hardcore proven by science that now we're saying, well, I don't know. That's not right. And there again, it's all about we believe what we want to believe.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. That's again, it's very rare that you get people that are open-minded enough to think anything is possible because everyone wants to have a concrete explanation for whatever they see, encounter, the unknown. They want to know what it is, and if they don't know, then they're going to put the closest explanation that they can explain it with to it. And I think that's definitely something that happens in the cryptid world. And again, Daniel's more open-minded to the transdimensional thing. That's just not my. I'm not down with that. But is it possible? Yes. Is it feasible? Do I believe that? No. But if I see something that changes my mind, I'll be the first one to say, yeah, I was wrong.
I can't wait to see one phase shift in front of him. I don't necessarily believe that they are dimensional. I just can't say that they're not, but I really hope if they are, I'm able to see one appear and disappear in front of Christian. That will be great.
Like I said, I'm not saying it's not possible. That we're in a realm or a field, if you will, where to say that nothing is impossible is kind of the mantra because anything is possible. We're dealing with things that aren't supposed to exist, fellas, and they do exist, and they have existed, and they might have been long. They may have been on this planet longer than Homo sapien man in our current form. Right? We just don't know, and that's what drives us to keep going. Is we want to find the answers to the questions. Whether or not we're ever going to find them, I'm hopeful. I just I don't know.
I think like, and one thing I just want to clarify is that like for everybody's beliefs on that, I totally, I don't want to come off pushy or aggressive with it. It's just from my experiences, whether it's been on a social media group or just by speaking with somebody and comparing it to the Bible, in my opinion, I just don't understand why we need to direct to that notion. And maybe that's because when you look at it from also another standpoint, such as the interdimensional theory, the normal enthusiast who starts off his research ain't going to believe that, I think, as much because they're going to sit there and try to base reality on a thought that they grew up to know, and now they're trying to get out of that reality, a thought. But at the same time, I'd want to see proof to verify that, because if someone were to tell me a Bigfoot or Dogman were to come out from this portal, I'm going to have a hard time buying into it because of the detail of it and the explanation of it. Because of it being a first-hand report, I don't know. I'd have to see it firsthand. That's my issue with all that type of stuff. I'm sure you guys have gotten reports there and there of people who've said something about portals and have left you wondering WTF.
Yeah, I've had several reports where, you know, but then, and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not saying it's not possible. Usually, when someone sees a portal open and just say a cryptid comes in and out of reality or this dimension or whatever you want to call it, most times it's followed up by then they communicated with me through mind speak or telepathy. Now, again, is it possible? Sure. Am I on that side of the spectrum believing it? Absolutely not. But I will give it that 0.01% chance that it actually happened. Uh, I just I just have noticed in my years of investigating and research and communicating with witnesses that when you usually see the portal, there's usually some telepathy or some mind speak that goes along with it. And that usually makes for an interesting interview.
I have to say as well that even though that for the longest time I thought it was always telepathic thoughts that may or may not be a thing, but interestingly to explain, I also think of it too that maybe it's not telepathic, but you know how you mentioned about this the whole vibes you get when you're in the woods. Could
Mhm.
perhaps they possess that same vibe that you see in the encounter when you look at it firsthand? Well, it may
I
not
mean,
be
it could be infrasound. It could be infrasound.
right. That's
One
what
of
I
the
was
side
gonna
effects of
say.
infrasound is, hearing things, dizziness, seeing orbs of light is actually a side effect from infrasound. So a lot of people that say, "Hey, we were out there, and then I saw these two orbs, and then we had a Bigfoot encounter." 99% of the time, in my opinion, that's because you saw those orbs of light because the Sasquatch saw you and then hit you with infrasound, and that's why you saw that because you were getting disorientated. So I think infrasound can explain a whole lot more than what people give it credit for. If you really want to do some research, go ahead and look at some of the research that the U.S. government did on infrasound in the 80s. And I think NASA had a lot to do with it. Um, but it's out there. I mean, it's available to find. It's not hard to look for. But you'd be surprised how much infrasound can change your perception of your reality and make you see things that aren't there, make you hear things. It's a big deal, and it's something I very much believe in. So I think infrasound basically, uh, if you got hit with infrasound, you might actually see a portal open up, but it could be a distortion in the light. It could just be a whole lot of an amalgamation of twisted lights and something that's happening because your central nervous system is being disrupted and you're not seeing things clearly. So there's a whole lot of explanations, but I think infrasound is probably one of the biggest.
And infrasound is a very huge thing, and that often has been played multiple times. And I agree with that. I've often seen infrasound as a good explanation for a lot of those situations. Now, getting on to another question that we kind of semi answered, but at the same time, I also think it applies to all fields, crypto and paranormal. In your opinion, from you guys both, Is social media a good tool for modern day cryptozoology, yes or no?
Man, Tiny, you want to take that one?
Honestly, that depends on how you're using it. If you're using it just as a means of, okay, well, this person, this amount of people have seen such and such in this area, or if you're using it in a way where you're just communicating different ideas, then yeah, it can be. If you're using it in an informative way, it can be. But social media in itself is not that way. What happens is you get all of these different groups that turn into cliques, and then you have people fighting amongst themselves. It's the same thing that happens, you know. So a ufologist looks at a paranormal investigator and goes, "You're crazy," and the Bigfoot guy looks at the ufologist and goes, "Well, you're crazy. I think you're both crazy." But why? We're all in it together, and if you really look at it, and social media could be a good thing if it was used appropriately. But there there's aspects of each field that we could really learn from each other. We could work together and actually come to some conclusions. There's a lot of UFO sightings can be correlated to Bigfoot sightings. Now why that is, we don't know. It's just an interesting coincidence. There's a lot of paranormal things happen with around cryptid hotspots. Christian and I went and we were doing an investigation in a specific area around here. It was cryptid, but it turned pretty paranormal. And I think that a lot of the Bigfoot sightings happen around what used to be uh, sacred Native American areas. And I think they're drawn to that energetic area. Now, if a paranormal investigator could talk to a Bigfoot guy about that on social media without 400 other people in the comments going, "You're crazy. You're crazy. No, he's crazy. No, you're crazy," then yeah, it could be beneficial. But that's not how it happens. So I guess long and short of it is it could be positive, but it's really not.
I mean, I hate to disagree with Tiny, and I really can't on most of those statements. The only thing I would even vaguely say is if cryptid researchers see, it's I can't really comment on how other people are because sometimes people do things that it doesn't make sense to me. An example of that is why would you be negative towards someone else's research? All right. Why can't we as a team or why can't we as a cryptid society just work together as a team? We could get so much more complicated, so much more accomplished if we work together as a team. The problem with that is, and Daniel pointed out, it's somebody always wants to be the alpha, somebody always wants to be the big dog. All right, and the community itself can be quite nasty, and it can. I don't think any one of us is disputing that. My biggest problem with social media is it's not accepting of everyone's theories, and if you don't agree with so and so, then you're wrong. So then you're on this guy's camp, and if you don't agree with so and so, then you're wrong. Then you're with this lady's camp or this individual's camp. It's not designed to make room for everyone's belief system, and that has nothing to do with social media. That is the cryptid community itself. Now, the thing that makes us different at American Cryptid and Paranormal, there I just said it's in our title. We do cryptid and paranormal, and for us, Daniel's talked about a UFOologist. we investigate UFO sightings. That we are UFOologists. We kind of do the whole gambit. But because of that, I think it gives us a much better understanding of how people interpret things that they've seen, the events they've experienced, and what they're taking from it. So, is social media, to answer your question, is social media helpful? Much like Daniel said, it is and it's not. It depends on how it's used. Could it be a force to help everyone better get along and understand the information that people are gathering? Of course. But the problem is, Chris, how are you going to take the ego out of the equation? And the other thing is, when people get great evidence, they always think they can monetize that. We've done ghost tours. I've had people on my ghost tours. They take a picture, they'll get some kind of image they think is a ghost. I've had someone, hey, can you share that with us? Oh no, I'm going to sell it. Okay, who's going to buy that? There's this delusion that if you're in the paranormal realm or in the cryptid realm, that all you need is one picture and you're going to be rich, or one video clip and you're going to be rich, or one TikTok and you're going to be rich, or one Twitter, or was it tweet? I'm sorry, a tweet, and you're going to be rich. It's not how that works. That is not how it works. So it's almost like you want to form an organization to say, all right, listen, let's all join an organization. You know how like MUFON does it? We should have something like that for cryptids. You know, Krypton or something like that. I don't know, whatever, whatever you want to call it, but an organization that specifically, you know, works together. And I'm sure it's been attempted, but it's just so hard to find people that are willing to put all their evidence and all their beliefs and all their theories out there, because, they do get ridiculed. If you don't agree with someone, fine. It's your God-given right not to agree with someone, but you don't have to be nasty about it. And that's where the problem, that's the underlying problem, the way I see it, is just people can't seem to be polite. And I don't know why. It makes no sense to me.
Well, and you have people out there too. If you put something on social media, and we put evidence on our social medias. I run Hearst Paranormal Encrypted. I've got stuff out there. We've got stuff on American Cryptid and Paranormal. People will steal it. They'll not only steal it, but people, when you put it on social media, people try and just rip it apart, and it starts arguments. And there's no real reason for that. And that's part of why when we put something out, we don't say, okay, this is a ghost looking out the window. Or, this is Bigfoot playing, piggy toes with his son. Because we can't say for sure.
Yeah, that's why we always leave everything up. Every picture we take, every video we post, everything we say, it is up to you to decide what this is. This is what we think it is. I don't think we have ever posted anything that definitively says this is a Bigfoot, this is a Gugwig, this is a Sasquatch. We don't do that.
And the more eyes on something, and that's another thing with social media. If people could control themselves, the more eyes on a picture, the better. Because Christian, you're going to see something I might not see.
Exactly.
Chris, you're going to see something that Christian might not see. And if people could, in whatever community you're a part of, whether it's cryptid or paranormal, whatever, if you could be adult enough to be a part of that group and say, look, I see such and such, instead of, now what, you're stupid because I see this, you're wrong. It's all about an approach. But people are also afraid to put their stuff out there because it gets stolen, it gets ridiculed, things like that. So, there's a lot of back and forth with social media. It could be a really good thing, but there's people. Be a perfectly good format if it weren't for people.
And you can't top that. It's sad, but it's true, Chris. And I know you're on social media a lot. That's part of what you do. And I mean, you see how people are, and it's not necessary, in my opinion. I just like I said, I just wish there was a way to get everyone to work together. Think how all we could accomplish is if we came together as a cryptid community and said, okay, here's what I got, here's what you got, here's where I found this. All right, okay, what is this? What's that? The amount of information we could regale with each other would be phenomenal. But again, as Tiny said, the problem with that is there's people in the way.
I'll say this though: the haters and the naysayers, for those investigators out there that are legitimate, and that are no, let me take that back. For those investigators out there that are in it for the right reasons, the ones that want to prove it, or the ones that are in it just for the love of being in it. The naysayers, the haters, all of those negative people help keep those people straight. Because, and I say this speaking mostly for myself, when I look at a piece of evidence, before I put it on a social media platform, I tear it apart. I try to think like the debunkers. I try to think like the haters, the naysayers. They help me be a better investigator. And a lot of people could really benefit from adopting that thought process, because it's not about me wanting them to say, yeah, that's a ghost. It's about me going, look at this cool anomaly I got. Here, what do you think about it? And I don't care if you dislike it, but I do look at what you tell me, and I try and look at it from your perspective, because you have to. If you can't debunk your own stuff, then you're doing something wrong. And that's the first thing you have to do, is try and debunk your own evidence, because somebody will somehow. And if you want to be able to defend your evidence, you need to be able to think from their perspective. So they help keep me straight.
I think it definitely makes us a lot more fussy about what we post. I mean, I know it does for me, because I do the same thing. I'm like, before I post anything, is there anything in here that doesn't look right, or someone's going to tear apart? And sometimes it's there, sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't. But that's why we always put the word possible evidence. All right. I'm not saying it's definitive evidence. I'm saying it's possible evidence. That's the difference. We are intelligent enough to understand that there's going to be people out there, no matter what we post, are going to rip it apart. That's why we just preface it as possible evidence. I have never once posted anything and said this is definitive. That's what it is. Boom. There's no other question about it. Because you can't, because there is a small chance, small as it is, it's still a chance that it could be something else. Now, even if you see it happen, even this, that, and the other thing, it doesn't matter. You could have something on video. You could have crystal clear 4K. Someone's going to find a flaw with it. And, I mean, we still can't even, people are still questioning the Patterson Gimlin film from 1967. All right. I mean, come on. It's always just going to be, there's always going to be that subset out there, and Daniel's right. In a way, they're beneficial because they keep us on our toes. Because before we think we have some kind of proof here, let's look and let's see what that, I don't like calling anyone a hater. I just say the naysayers, because they may just be, completely convinced that people in the cryptid and the paranormal realm are just crazy. And I get that, but that's their right to believe that. But if you're showing them some evidence that it's hard to refute, then that might change their mind. So, I just say I call them naysayers. But on the flip side of that, I just don't expect people. There's no need to be mean or malicious to anyone. When people post something and they're actually being earnest about what they're doing and trying to show you what they found, take that into consideration. Just be nice. It's easy to be nice. It's a lot easier to be nice than it is to be mean.
Well, one of the really difficult parts about what we do, and really any investigator, the definitive proof comes as a personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're out here, we're looking for Bigfoot. Christian, you and I run into Bigfoot. We're looking Bigfoot in the eye. He's standing there picking his nose, looking at us, going, "Why are these hairless monkeys in my woods?" and we're too excited to take a picture. Or we take a picture and somebody goes, no, that's somebody in a suit. Okay, we know it wasn't somebody in a suit because we had that personal experience. You can't record that personal experience. You can't record how looking Bigfoot in the eye made you feel. You can't really communicate that to somebody else. That's your definitive proof. You'll never have definitive proof unless you can taste it, touch it, feel it. And as an investigator, we believe what we believe. We investigate because we've had these definitive personal experiences. The people that come to us because they've had these personal experiences, and they either want help or they want understanding. They want somebody to go, no, you're not crazy. You know, this stuff happens. And the people that have never had a personal experience are either going to believe because they want to or not believe because they've never experienced it. And there again, you go into a whole lot of human nature stuff when you go into that, a whole lot of psych. And Chris, psych is my first love. I spent a lot of time in the medical field, 20 some odd years. And I bring a lot of that into what I do. You have to bring the human into the paranormal. But without that personal experience, you're not going to have that definitive proof. I think even if somebody did bring a Sasquatch in and lay it on a table, there's still going to be people going, no, that's fake, because they don't want to believe it.
Well, because it changes their whole reality, Daniel. I mean, you know, Tiny. How many times have we talked to people and said, "Oh, that's not real"? And again, I'm a man. I'm a very religious man, but there's people out there that if Bigfoot was to be proven real, that's going to shake their faith. And again, I don't see why it should, but it would. And that's the difference. Is there's people out there that are convinced that they know exactly what's walking on this planet because that's it. They know just because they know. There's no room for ifs, ands, or buts, or maybes. This is the way it is, and that is it. So it's just kind of hard to deal with anyone like that, especially when you're dealing with the cryptid and the paranormal realm. So it's just that subset of people that you're never going to be able to get along with, or you're never going to be able to convince. You could bring in a live one and say, "Hey, this is Frank. He's a North American primate. He's 9 foot tall and he weighs 2,300 pounds, and primarily he eats berries, but on occasion, he'll grab a deer or an elk, and he needs 10 to 12,000 calories a day to keep him going. He drinks 6 gallons of water." You could show them all that, and they still wouldn't believe it. So, I mean, it's a conundrum.
That's not a natural occurring ape. That's genetically engineered by our government for some reason.
Exactly. It's the military. The military-industrial complex did it. Same with Dogman. I love it when people say, Dogman's new. Dogman's is a genetic experiment that got out. Or Dogman's an alien. We've had the cynocephali here since the Egyptian times, probably Sumerian times. The Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztecs, they've all had depictions of the cynocephali. So unless they've been, coming here on vacation for the last few millennia, I'd say they've been a natural creature here for a long time. But again, that's just my thoughts on it. And someone might have a different one. The problem is I'm more than willing to accept someone else's thought process, but yet someone's not willing to understand and accept my thought process. And that's where you usually have the issues.
Both of you guys bring up very good points, and I have to say it was really informative listening to you guys, because you really do bring up a lot of interesting information in reference to this. And I'm glad that I brought up the question and the way I went about a lot of these with a very good way of going about it, because I think you guys delivered something that not many like to be open about, and I like to ask that because it needs to be more open, because people are taking cryptid research and paranormal research as roulette, as ways for making money, as ways for people to get fame. We tell bullshit stories to get money because it works, because humans are so gullible to believe anything. In terms of the most ridiculous of things. And don't get me wrong, there are times, and I'm not saying this, and it sounds like I contradict what I believe in, but it's really not. Because if you're going to tell me that Bigfoot's going to do a somersault and magically going through a portal, rip a goat's head off with a punch, and do all these Chuck Norris type things, then I'm going to have a hard time believing that, is my point. And it's very...
Chris, I have to say something. All right? Bigfoot does not mess with Chuck Norris. That's all I want to say.
I was gonna say, but and that's why he copies them. But it's just like the whole basis of it just gets so criminally out of control. And I'm glad that you guys said what you had to say, because it needs to be addressed. Well, guys, before we do conclude the show, I want to thank you guys for coming on once more. It's great to hear from you again, Christian, and Daniel, you as well. We had a more bigger, in-depth conversation compared to last time, and I think you guys are very good, informative adults and gentlemen. And before you guys do go, though, can you please promote everything you guys got going on right now? Where can we find you? What's your upcoming research investigations? What is going on?
Well, I'll be honest, man, Chris, we've been so busy trying to play catch up from COVID. We've got more irons in the fire than we can shake a stick at. But everything we're doing, you can find us on American Cryptid and Paranormal.com. We also have a podcast. You can YouTube American Encrypted Paranormal Society, and our funny enough, our the name of our podcast is also called Beyond Fringe. But I don't think anyone's going to get us mistaken. And if they do, that would definitely be on our side, because you've got a lot more followers than us. So thanks in advance. But if anyone ever wants to reach us, or they want to be part of our show, or they want to give us some information, or they want to tell us a cryptid or paranormal story, they can get us at 828-407-0046. And Daniel, if you want to tell them about your organization, that'd be great.
I operate Hearst Paranormal Encrypted, and that is HURST Paranormal Encrypted. And if you want to reach out to me, ask any questions, tell any stories, talk about Christian a little bit, that's okay. You can reach me at hearstparanormal@gmail.com. I have a little bit of stuff on Facebook and a little bit on YouTube under the same name, though I have been slack. I've been working 2 jobs 7 days a week lately, but I'm getting ready to put my toes back in the water, so to speak, and get some stuff going.
Yeah, we as a matter of fact, we just recorded another podcast for American Cryptid and Paranormal last night, so we'll be putting that up soon. We are also revamping our website, so there are going to be some changes there. And again, you can get us on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I believe it's at Society Cryptid for Instagram, and Asheville Cryptid on Twitter. And like I said, if anytime you want to get in touch with either one of us, please feel free. We're more than happy to answer any questions, help out any way we can. Our main goal is to help people, and that is what we truly enjoy doing. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll be more than happy to help you if we can.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you guys again. You guys have a fantastic evening. And ladies and gentlemen, please check out the American Cryptid Paranormal Society and these guys' respected projects. Gentlemen, you have a good night.
Thank you for having us on. It was a pleasure.